Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. If you're a regular viewer of my channel, you'll know that I have a real soft spot in my heart for the Apple IIc. I had this machine as my second computer, well, third computer technically, because my first machine was a VIC-20. We had a family Apple II Plus, which I used a lot of because the disk drives and the 80 columns made it a lot more appealing than my VIC-20. And then my father picked me up an Apple IIc for myself. And it came with the little green screen and the stand and everything. And I absolutely loved this computer. This IIc is not the one I had as a kid. In fact, this was the one I put in a dishwasher. There was a video about cleaning the keyboard, I think. And yeah, the computer, can't remember if I put the motherboard in the dishwasher, but definitely the keyboard went in the dishwasher. But this machine works great. It's been retro-brighted and it looks really good. And it brings back lots of memories of when I was a kid. But when I was a kid, there was a machine that I really, really wanted. And that was at the same time I had the Apple IIc. And it was this machine right here, a Laser 128EX. I'll get into this more in a second, but the 128, of course, looks a lot like the Apple IIc on my lap here, but it's quite a bit enhanced, specifically the EX version here. So in this video, I want to dig into what this machine's all about, take a look at the specs and everything, and then see if this machine even works. I have no idea if it works, and then of course take it apart, take a deep dive, all those things I like to do. So without further ado, let's get right to it. When I think back to reading about this machine in magazines, even though I had the Apple IIc at the time, which was quite a capable Apple II, it had all the components built in, I had an external floppy drive, a mouse for it, I had a modem, I even had the Cricket, which was sort of a little sound device with an AY sound chip to produce multi-channel sound. The IIc setup was good, but when I read about what this thing could do, I don't know, I just really wanted one. Now, the reality is I was still very young and I was a kid and there was no chance in hell I was going to end up with one of these when I had a perfectly functional Apple IIc. But this box talks about the specs of this machine and it really brings back the memories of why I wanted this thing. So let's rewind a little bit and talk about what is this machine. Well, we'll take a look at the actual computer in a second, but you see a picture of it right here. And it looks a lot like the Apple IIc, right? It's a little all-in-one computer. It's got a floppy drive on the side here as a handle. This could even prop itself up like the IIc, but it has a larger keyboard with a number pad, which is an enhancement over the IIc. And oddly, it has function keys, which I don't actually know what they do. So we'll take a look at that in a second. But hold on a second, I think I've got ahead of myself here. I haven't mentioned the most important thing. This machine is an Apple IIe and IIc compatible computer. So it's actually totally capable of running pretty much, as far as I understand, all Apple IIc and IIe software. So even though it's not made by Apple, it is actually a valid clone. Now, what I find interesting about this box is that I don't even see the name of the company that made this computer, which was VTech. And yes, it's VTech, the same company that makes children's toys, little learning computers and things like that, pretty much relatively junky stuff, but they also made this machine. Now, I'm not sure if they designed this machine from scratch or this was designed by someone else and then VTech bought them, which might explain why this box, at least on this front panel, has absolutely no branding for VTech at all. It's not on the machine, it's not on the front, it's nowhere to be seen. So that's a bit odd. All right, enough blabbering. Let's talk about the specs of the Laser 128EX. Now there wasn't a 128, then the EX was a second model, and I think there was an EX/2, which was a slightly enhanced one over this one. Now I have never owned any of the Laser Apple II compatible machines, so I couldn't tell you the difference off the top of my head between the EX and the regular 128, but it was the EX that I remember reading about in magazines and drooling over and wishing I had. Okay, so yeah, the specs. Take a look at some of these awesome features. Right off the bat, super fast triple speed processor. It's 1 megahertz, which is stock Apple II speed, 2.3 and 3.6 megahertz. I don't exactly know the technology used behind this. Apple's own Apple IIc Plus, which came out later, had a 4 megahertz mode, but that used acceleration technology by the company Zip. A company named Zip made the Zip chip, which could run at 1 megahertz or 4 megahertz on other Apple IIs, like the regular IIc or the IIe, and Apple actually licensed that. I think they licensed it. They didn't just steal it. Yeah, I think they licensed it, and that's where that speed increase came about. I don't know about this one, though, with the 2.3 and the 3.8 megahertz. Those are interesting divisions there, so I'm not quite sure of the technology behind that. Maybe we can figure that out a little bit when we open it up. And next it says it has a built-in 192 kilobytes of RAM. I don't quite get that. Maybe that's a mistake. It says 128K of user RAM plus 64K of video RAM, which really doesn't make sense to me. I don't quite understand that. But the Apple IIc and the enhanced IIe have 128K, the 64K of the Apple II Plus, for instance, and then an extra 64K, which is used in combination with 80 column mode and the double high res. It says it's expandable to 1 megabyte via an internal fully socketed RAM board. That implies that this is inside this machine, and when we open it up, we should be able to see those RAM chips, and then hopefully I can find some chips and we'll populate it. We'll see if that works. Built-in disk drive, this will be a normal 170K floppy drive, just like on the regular Apple IIc, same exact compatible drive format. Built-in parallel printer interface. This is unique to the Laser 128 over the Apple IIc, which only had serial ports, and that's it. It had a modem and a printer port, but they were both serial. This has parallel printer interface and built-in serial printer interface as well. 4080 column text, that's just like the Apple IIc and the IIe, nothing different there. Built-in high-res graphics, okay, well that's exactly the same as any other Apple II. Built-in joystick mouse interface. I assume this joystick mouse interface is compatible with the Apple II stuff. We can test that by plugging in a mouse that would work on the IIc. Built-in modem port. Okay, so it's saying here that it's got a serial port for the modem, so like the IIc, which had two serial ports, like I said, printer and modem, this has serial port for the printer, serial port for the modem, and a parallel port for the printer, so both there. Built-in video expansion port. What this means, this port is actually RGB compatible. And we're gonna test that, because that was one of the things I really, really wanted for my Apple IIc. Only until I got my Apple IIgs, I think in 1987, might have been 88 even, did I really see RGB color. Not even right away, because I didn't get an RGB monitor with my 2GS at first, just due to the super expensive price of the monitor. But later I did get an off-brand RGB monitor to use with it. But with my 2C, I really, really wanted to see RGB, and I never could. And when I saw that this machine had RGB capability, I wanted that so badly. And then the last thing which this thing has that I really wanted to play with is a built-in Apple IIe expansion slot. And yes, that is a regular expansion slot like in an Apple II Plus or a IIe that theoretically can work with regular Apple II cards. I don't know the details. It will be really fun to experiment with that. And at the bottom it says the expandable Laser 128EX comes completely ready to run thousands of Apple IIe and IIc software programs without buying anything extra. So cool. So if that's not enough to get you excited about the machine, let's just flip this thing around. All right, so here it is. This is the side of the machine, kind of cute. I like the packaging that shows you the machine from different angles. There is that expansion slot, standard Apple IIe expansion slot. Built-in expansion slot, it says, and this is a sticker that's actually stuck on here. And the text says, for laser expansion box. So I don't think I really knew about this when I was a kid. I thought I could just stick a regular card into this, and I'm going to try doing that, but I guess they sold a little expansion box that hung off the side of this machine that held your expansion card, or perhaps cards, probably just one card, and then that would keep it from getting knocked out of the computer. Obviously, sticking a card into the side of this machine is not the best thing, but I'm going to try it, like I said. And finally, on the back of the box, we have a nice set of things to talk about how cool this machine is. This box is really designed to be consumer friendly and sell the features of this machine to prospective buyers. So I guess this would be sitting on the shelf maybe at Toys R Us or a store like Sears in the US, and a parent might walk up looking for an Apple II and see that this costs most likely significantly less than the Apple IIc, and then it would talk about all the awesome features it had, and the parent would buy it, and it would be a good buy, because this machine really was fully compatible. It wasn't selling you some lie, some bill of goods that it wasn't actually capable of doing these things. It really was. And now we have a close-up of all the ports and things on the back of this. So we have the joystick and mouse port, which looks just like the one on the Apple IIc. We have the parallel printer interface port. Clearly that's different pinout than a standard PC one. It's a 15-pin connector. Then we have a switch called Standard Alt Selector Switch. That's pretty nondescript, and it's weird that it's even pointed out on the box here, because I couldn't tell you what this is even for. I assume maybe it's for the printer, I don't know. And next we have the video expansion port, and it says RGB/LCD. Now, Apple sold an LCD clip-on monitor for the Apple IIc that plugged into a similar looking port on the back of the IIc. But the 15-pin connector here on the back of the IIc is absolutely not RGB. It does not have an RGB signal on it. It is possible to buy a little box that converts to RGB, and there were some of those in the old days. Video 7, I think, made one, and there's a modern FPGA version, but it does not have RGB native coming out of these pins. I am under the impression, and I was when I was a kid, that this port has RGB signals directly in it. You don't need to buy an adapter, and that's what I was really desperate for. We have a composite video output just like on the IIc. We have the external floppy drive connector. It says it supports 3.5-inch or 5.25-inch disk drives. I'm kind of curious about that because the Apple IIc, not the IIc Plus, but the regular IIc, only supported 3.5-inch disk drives that were the SmartPort variety called the UniDisk. It was sort of a special protocol, and in the floppy drive itself, I think it had a 6502 processor or something like that, very Commodore-esque, right? And it actually handled the drive interface stuff directly, so it was slower than a regular floppy drive. To use like a 2GS floppy drive, that didn't work on the original IIc because the IIc, it wasn't fast enough. Later IIcs, like the IIc Plus and then the Apple IIgs, had a special chip that was designed to kind of handle that 3.5-inch disk drive, which had the higher data transfer rates. So I don't know what this supports, if it supports, I mean, I know it supports a standard Apple 5.25-inch floppy drive. I just don't know what type of 3.5-inch drive. And unfortunately, plugging the wrong 3.5-inch drive into the wrong computer, those Apple made several different 3.5-inch drives, can cause damage. So that's kind of scary. We have a modem port, which looks exactly the same as the IIc modem port, pinout-wise. We have the serial printer port, so again, IIc compatible. We have a power input port, and then we have the on-off switch. So very similar looking to the back of the IIc, except for this potential RGB port, and then the additional port here for the printer. We got the feature list again with a little more detail. It does say that the printer port is Centronics compatible, so I assume we could just go from that 15-pin connector right here to a standard Centronics parallel port type connector. It does talk about the high resolution graphics here, 560 by 192. So that is standard Apple double high res graphics, which is on the IIc and the IIe. 16 colors, I mean, that's 16 colors, it's artifact color. I'll be curious if there is RGB, if it does support all 16 of those colors. It says here, the serial port supports 7 software selectable baud rates, 110 to 19,200, which I think is exactly the range of the Apple Super Serial card, which I'm sure this is a clone of. And here we are with the video expansion port, RGB or LCD. Interesting. And then here it is, built-in general expansion slot. Lets you expand your computer with the laser expansion box. And that is a sticker again. I'm really curious to know if there's any text under there. I have a feeling that you can just plug a normal card into that slot, but they got in trouble by the FCC because there would be no shielding around that card, and they probably were forced to release an expansion box which simply connected to the shielding in the computer and encased the actual expansion card for emissions reasons. And then they had to go back and stick these stickers on the box on the side and on the back here. And then it talks about the specs here. So Microsoft Basic, it says it's Apple IIe compatible. I'm pretty sure that AppleSoft Basic on the Apple II was definitely a Microsoft Basic that was just called AppleSoft Basic. But the reality is Microsoft licensed their products like DOS and BASIC to whoever would pay. So Apple couldn't stop a company like VTech or the Laser here from having a compatible BASIC. We have the video display modes. Those all look exactly the same as on the Apple II, and has upper and lowercase letters available, normal, inverse, and flashing. And it has mouse characters available, mouse text. That was an Apple sort of pet ski type of thing that the 2E, well, the 2C introduced, and the 2E Enhanced got it, and allowed for some text graphics like boxes for Windows and stuff. Used in programs like AppleWorks. You'd see the little Apple logos, text character, things like that. That was introduced later. The Apple II Plus and the 2 did not have any of those. 90 key typewriter keyboard, 10 function keys. It has QWERTY and Dvorak keyboard layouts. So the Apple IIc in North America also has both of those modes. On the 2C, there's a keyboard button right here that on the international ones will switch between two different international layouts typically. And the one I had in Canada, because that's where I was when I had my 2C, it switched between the French layout, French-Canadian layout, and standard US keyboard layout. Here's that video expansion port again, LCD panel, RGB monitor, and RF modulator. Again, like I mentioned, 2C could support LCD panel and RF modulator, but not RGB without a special adapter. All right, here it confirms the joystick port is standard Apple IIe and 2C compatible, also 2GS. And here it says the mouse port is 2C compatible. Okay, that's cool. And it says one 5¼ drive is built in, Apple compatible, registered trademark. And then expansion slot, 50-pin slot, Apple compatible. Like I said, I think it just works. Power supply is included. Power requirement 17 volts DC at 1.8 amps. All interfaces use Apple IIc standard connectors, meaning you can plug in the printer cables and whatever else into all those ports. Just things like the printer interface for Parallel is not compatible. And here's some samples of software, of course, that works on this thing. It does run pretty much everything Apple II software, including AppleWorks in the middle here, Print Shop, Flight Simulator 2, a whole gamut of things. There is an optional second external floppy drive. There is a monitor with stand you could buy. I'm sure this is an OEM of whatever. There's a laser branded joystick for games requiring high-speed hand-eye coordination. What a load of crap. That thing looks like a piece of junk. The buttons are on the side here. Really have to wonder about that. And oh look, just like the Apple IIc, there's a bag, a carrying case bag, padded, and that's such a copy of what Apple released. The Apple one was a kind of a grayish color, but there you go, red. Interesting. And there it is. It's lightweight and portable. We have a man in a suit carrying his Apple II around. That is just so unlikely that that would ever happen. And then down here, 1987 VTCL. Made in Hong Kong, Laser 120EX is a trademark of Video Technology Computers Limited, distributed in the USA by Video Technology Computers in Northbrook, Illinois. So that is VTech, I'm pretty sure. And maybe they had changed their name to VTech a little bit later than this. But this machine came out in 1987 when the 2C came out in 84 originally, maybe the very end of 84. So this machine was probably pretty cheap, while the 2C was still selling. I'm sure this undercut the 2C quite a bit. And on this side of the box, we have the internal floppy drive, which has a standard flip-down arm, unlike the 2C ALPS mechanism, which was much more like a Commodore 64 drive. You had to push it in to kind of eject the disk. So this is a very standard-looking disk drive. And then we have volume knob and a headphone jack, which is on the opposite side of the 2C. It's on the other side of the machine than from the disk drive. So yeah, a little bit of a difference there. So that's a look at the Laser 128 box, and on the bottom, yep, nothing to report, it's just white. So let's take a look at the actual Laser 128. All right, and here is the Laser 128EX. Now this machine's a little dirty. It was actually more dirty when I took it out of the box originally, but I spent a little bit of time cleaning it, but I haven't given it a deep clean. There's still some crap in the grooves here, and the keyboard is just had a surface clean. But yeah, the machine is pretty cool looking. Let's compare it directly to its competition, the Apple IIc. So from a size perspective, definitely the Laser 128 is a lot bigger. Now I've seen pictures of the Laser 128 without the EX, the original model, and it didn't have the same lined sort of late 80s styling that this has. If I recall, it just has sort of slits that run across the top of the machine. This is a little bit more stylistic and nice looking, if you ask me. Although The 2C has just a beautiful, beautiful industrial design. I think Apple knocked it out of the park with the 2C, especially when it's complete with its monitor and the stand. It's just so elegant, and I love the snow white color scheme and these lines. So yeah, this machine, a little less inspired, but it was a clone. It wasn't supposed to be as elegant as this machine. It's clearly not as compact, but still, nonetheless, it's relatively small, especially compared to something like an Apple IIe. Now the keyboard layout is very similar to the 2C, like the arrow keys are in the same exact position. For the Apple keys, which would be on either side of the space bar, we have triangles, open triangle, closed triangle. It would be called open Apple and closed Apple on the 2C. I think if we exclude the numeric keypad and the function keys, really laser copied everything about the 2C keyboard layout. Now from a feel perspective, it's okay. It's definitely a rubber dome keyboard in here, I'm pretty sure. The Apple IIc, some models, it's an Alps keyboard, feels really nice. This particular one I have here is not Alps. It's kind of mushy feeling. I have removed the rubber membrane on the 2C here that makes it extra mushy. It's still not great. The keyboard on this is tactile, so that's the rubber dome sort of compressing. You can feel when it actuates the key, but it is definitely not clicky like this 2C is here. Now, as I already pointed out, there is a number keypad on here, which probably just has standard Apple II keys. It does have a break key and a pause key. I'm assuming the break hits Control-C. That's all it actually does, and that pause is probably Control-S, which, if I recall, is definitely pauses on the 2C, I think. You know, it's been so long, I can't really remember. But the rest of these keys are probably just reproductions of the main keyboard. And on the Apple II, it doesn't really have anything like scan codes, like on a PC. So there's no way it would be able to tell the difference between pushing like this 6 key and this 6 key. And I will be curious if pushing Shift 6 gives the little caret symbol, and if pushing Shift and this 6 also does. That would be an interesting test. It may not be the case, but... And then the function keys, F1 through 10, who knows what those do? I don't know. There's a reset key here, and you would have to push Control Reset, probably just like on the Apple II, I would imagine. And sure, it's open Apple or open triangle Control Reset. The 3-finger salute was alive and well on the Apple IIc. Yeah, the reboot sequence started with the IBM PC. I mean, there might have been machines before with Control Delete, but the Apple IIc and the Apple IIe definitely had Open Apple Control and Reset to reboot. And on this machine, just like the 2C, you do it with one hand. We have some indicator lights for the disk drive and the power LED, just like the Apple IIc, but there's also a caps lock indicator, and that's because the caps lock on this keyboard is a soft caps lock. It's not a latching switch like it is on the 2C. So that just lights up to tell you that it is engaged. We have some switches here, and this is where things differentiate from the 2C a little bit. So there's a 40 and an 80 column switch. Now, the 2C actually does have that. It's a button. It's just above the keyboard. But this just tells some specific programs to run in 40 column or 80 columns mode. Like if you have a high resolution monochrome monitor, you'd set this to 80 columns. So a program might default to 80 columns. Realistically, on the real 2C, and I'm sure on this machine, this doesn't really do much, so there's no real point to switch it. And then next switch is serial and parallel for the printer, and I am assuming this does more than just send the slot 1 output that goes to the serial port to the parallel port, because I think there's a different ROM that gets engaged depending on which way you have these switches set. So you probably have to switch this and reboot the machine, and then slot 1 will now appear, if I switch this up, as a parallel card, probably like a grappler type card or something. And then the next switch here is something the Apple II does not have, color and mono. Setting this to color will output a normal color composite signal just like on any Apple II, but setting this to mono has an interesting effect. On the Apple II, when you're in text mode, it outputs a monochrome video signal. There's no color burst, therefore your monitor will not try to decode color. But when it outputs any kind of graphics, it automatically adds a color burst, which turns on the color decoding circuitry in your monitor, your TV or your monitor. And that has the side effect of making really ugly artifacts on text, single pixel wide text. That's just the way NTSC works, and it's a side effect of the way Apple II Color works. Now, what this does is when you switch it to mono, it will turn off the color burst signal on all video output modes on this machine. So whether you're in graphics or text mode, it will never have a color burst signal, which means your TV will never try to decode color, and it will eliminate that color fringing of text. Some games, like Music Construction Set by Electronic Arts, that does not use any color. It really needs to be looked at on a monochrome monitor, or it looks relatively ugly. So on this computer, you just set this to mono, and even if you have a television set, you're going to get a monochrome picture, and it will look a lot better and be a lot more readable than on a real Apple II. So that is pretty cool. So let's take a look at the side. There is what we saw on the side of the box there. We have the floppy drive, there is the volume knob and the headphone jack. And then let's take a look at the other side, and there it is. There's that expansion slot that says for laser expansion box. Also, I am noticing, looks like there's some plastic on here that was never peeled. So I'm gonna do it. 1987 to 2021, I'm gonna peel the plastic. Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. There it is. And let's take a look at the back. Now we already went over all this stuff on the back of the box, so there's nothing really to talk about here except this toggle switch. Remember it said standard/alt? Well, on here it says standard keyboard and alt keyboard. That's got to be the standard layout or Dvorak. So that's cool. That actually explains that a little bit better. On the Apple IIc, that switch is actually on the front of the computer by the keyboard. So they stuck it to the back. There is this ugly warning sticker that just says, before connecting or disconnecting external drive, turn the system power off. Your computer may be damaged if this rule is not followed. Well, yeah, there's 12 volts on these pins here. That's for running the drive motor, and I guess that's the danger, right? Everything else on here is exactly like the box. Here is that handle that feels a little cheaper than the one on the 2C, but it is similar. This would let the computer prop up, or you could carry it. Portable, you know, portable, amazing. And there's the machine propped up on the handle. Pretty cool. It gives that little tilt thing going on. The Apple IIc had that. This is a direct copy of Apple's design, just done a little bit cheaper. One more thing to take a look at, and on the bottom of the machine, there is a little bit of stuff here to see. There is a metal cover that has 2 screws, and obviously underneath it there are some switches. And look here, it says for PAL version only, not using LCD or using LCD. Up or down, okay? And then external slot 5 enable, internal slot 5 enable, and external slot 7 enable, and internal slot 7 enable. So I take it that these switches control which slot the external connector on the side of this machine is mapped to, either slot 7 or slot 5. So typically on an Apple IIc, slot 5 is reserved for the smart port, which would be like an external 3.5-inch drive or even an external hard drive that plugs into the floppy connector. That would be slot 5. Slot 6, of course, is the internal disk drive. Slot 7 on the Apple IIc is not really used. I know it changed depending on what ROM you have, but I think one of the ROM versions would try to initialize AppleTalk. Otherwise it would be the mouse port or something. I don't know. It's a bit strange. But it looks like on this machine, I mean, I don't know what internal slot 7 is, because honestly, the Apple IIc doesn't have anything on slot 7. So yeah, I'm curious what that's mapped to. But anyways, it lets you pick which one of these would be on the external port. So if you're not going to use a 3.5-inch disk drive, you can just pick slot 5. And we have here personal computer. There's the FCC ID, Video Technology Computer Limited, Laser 128EX, made in Hong Kong. So everything we kind of knew already. Not sure if it's readable, but do not remove cover, no user serviceable parts inside. 1987 Video Technology Corporation or Computers Limited. Really, nothing inside serviceable. Well, I beg to differ, and I'm taking the cover off. Couple other miscellaneous things on the bottom here. There's a sticker. It says number 087417 CPS. Must be the serial number, I suppose, because I don't see a serial number anywhere else. 711, whatever that means. And then down here, drive speed adjust, and I think you can stick something in this hole here, a little tiny adjustment tool for adjusting the drive speed without opening the computer. Neat. And that's it, I think, for the outside of the Laser 128EX. I think at this point, it's time to test this thing out. Oh, wait a second, I just noticed that this badge also has the plastic on it. Okay, you know what, I think I'm not gonna touch that right now, this particular one, because I do wanna give this a thorough cleaning, and then I'll peel off that label. But it is kind of cool that that plastic is still on there, never peeled off in the entire life of this machine. Let's take a quick look at the Wikipedia article on the Laser 128. The article talks about the specs, which we've already covered for the EX, but it does mention here the Laser 128 also had a single expansion slot, as we know, which gives it better expansion capabilities than the 2C, but the card remains exposed. The slot is intended for an $80 expansion chassis with 2 slots compatible with the Apple IIe slot 5 and 7. Interesting. The article goes on to say that Central Point Software, which was one of the main big dealers of this machine early on, said that during testing they only found that these 3 games, which were Broderbund's games, didn't work because of the copy protection. Now, Choplifter there was a pretty important game, very popular, so it not working was a big deal. Maybe Broderbund released an updated version that worked, or of course you could use the cracked version, which probably worked. And then down here we have the various models that were released of this particular model. The 128, the original one, came out in 86, 1 megahertz, and $479. And then 1 year later, the EX came out, the one I have here, which gave us that much faster 3.6 megahertz speed, plus that RAM expansion card, which we've already talked about in the specs, for merely $20 more. Absolutely amazing. And then there was an EX/2, which had the same speed and the same expansion capabilities, but the primary difference was it was available with a 3.5-inch internal drive for a little bit more money, $50 extra over the 5.25-inch version. It's weird they sold an EX/2, which was literally identical to the original EX. If anyone knows about what actual differences exist between these two machines, please let me know in the comment section, because that is kind of curious. This section about history is quite interesting. So as we mentioned above, the 128 was released for $479, while Central Point Software sold it for $395 mail order. And by comparison, the Apple IIe sold for $945. Wow. Apple filed a lawsuit, of course, to stop distribution, but VTech obtained an approval to export the 128 to the US in 1986. And the lawsuit reportedly had no effect on the demand. And Central Point, the most prominent dealer, sold the Laser 128. In accessories, a full-page magazine advertisement, which is what I just showed earlier in the video, claiming the computer without expansion slots is a dead end that stays behind as technology advances. Ouch! It seems that in 1988, VTech purchased a majority share in Central Point Software and formed Laser Computer as a division of the company. It ended Central Point's mail order sales, the 128, only selling the computer through retail dealers like Sears. And that would explain why the box looks just like it does. Oh, I suppose the EX2 had one addition besides the 3.5-inch disk drive. It was a MIDI port. And it seems that mentions the $499 version. And then, yes, Apple released the Apple IIc Plus, I guess, as a counter argument or a response to the EX2 with the 3.5-inch disk drive. How funny is that to see Apple on the back foot? As I mentioned earlier, the IIc Plus had that faster processor in it. And let's see when this was released in 1988. So it absolutely was a response to the Laser 128EX. Amazing. And they released it for $675, which was still more expensive by what, like $200 or $150 or so versus the Laser one with the 3.5-inch disk drive. But the reality is no one really wanted to have a 3.5-inch disk drive, which Apple kind of forced you into with this machine. You had to buy that external disk drive, the 5.25-inch one, to use all your Apple II software. So it was quite expensive. And it talks about compatibility here. So unlike Franklin, VTech reverse engineered Apple Monitor ROM using a clean room design rather than copying it. So yeah, Franklin was one of the other big Apple II clones, and they obviously got sued by Apple. So like the Franklin Ace, which I've shown on the channel before. And unfortunately, I think it didn't end well for Franklin. But VTech, on the other hand, they did it in a very legal way. And there he is. Oh, AppleSoft Basic. Yep, licensed from Microsoft, as I had thought. Apple carefully studied the Laser 128, but unlike its efforts directed at Franklin, Apple was unable to force the Laser 128 off the market. Ha! There's some other interesting information in this article. I recommend you go check it out if you want to know more about this machine. All right, for turning this thing on, I do need a power supply. And I think I might have mentioned, unfortunately, even though I have the original box for the Laser, I do not have the original power supply, and I also don't have the original manuals. I just got the box, and I got this computer. So luckily, from a power supply perspective, for the Laser 128, the Apple II version, it can use the same power supply as in the Apple IIc, which of course, I happen to have one right here, but I have confirmed by doing some research online that it is the same power supply. So I will plug this in and we will be testing with this power supply. We will be looking at the output of the Laser 128 on the RetroTink. It's just gone to sleep, don't worry. And the machine, I have never turned this on. I have no idea if this works, if smoke's gonna come out of it, or what's gonna happen. So here we go. It's plugged into the power supply. The RetroTink is connected to the composite output. I have it set for monochrome on the switch here, but whatever. Here we go. We got nothing. Whoa. Okay. That did come on. I didn't hear a beep. Pushing control and reset. Oh, hey, there it is. It worked. It took a long time to come up, but that might have been the RetroTink just sleeping. Wow. Well, there we go. Let's see if the keyboard is working. I mean, it might be dirty. Yeah, no, it's good. It seems like the reset key is a little finicky. I have to push it kind of hard. All right, so Laser 128 ROM 4.2 Central Point Software Incorporated. Central Point Software, which made like Copy 2 Plus and other software, they were based right here in Portland. In fact, their office was just across the river, probably a couple miles from my house. So I'm extremely happy that this computer works. Troubleshooting is fun, but sometimes it's nice when a computer just works. And I happen to know that Laser came up with a whole bunch of custom chips that are surface mount inside this machine. And of course, if any of those are bad, there is no hope to actually fixing this machine. So it's cool that it works. All right, so I have to end this video here. I think I've already gone on for quite a while talking about the Laser 128. There's still a lot to look at on this machine. Taking a look on the inside, testing more of the functionality, getting that RGB working, checking out those dip switches, plugging in a card to the external side port here. There is lots more to see on this thing, but I hope you found at least this part of the video interesting and illuminating on some of the capabilities of this thing. Because honestly, it was my first time ever using one of these things, and it was kind of cool to see that it does work, that this machine works, but I can't wait to try out more stuff with this machine. So if you like this video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you didn't, you know what to do, all that YouTube-y stuff, subscribe, etc., etc. I really want to thank all my patrons. It's absolutely been amazing the support I've gotten. If you want to support the channel, you can, of course. There's a link in the description below, but you'll see all their names scrolling by here. It's stunning how many people have jumped in to support me. It absolutely warms my heart. Thank you very much. And that is going to be it. So stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.